My name is JAYLEN Adams. I'm a senior at Olympic High School.
My name is India Williams, and I attend East Mecklenburg High School.
My name is JAYLA SOARES, and I attend the West Charlotte High School.
My name is Jamari Joyner. I'm a sophomore, and I go to Harding University High School.
My name is DARIUS, LESANE, and I'm a junior at Harding University High School.
My name is Justin Castro. I'm in the 11th grade, and I attend Harding University High School.
Hello, my name is MILIANI Smith, and I attend Charlotte Country Day School.
My name is Larry Bosc, and I'm a retired teacher. Taught for 41 years, most of it at East Mecklenburg High School. I was very excited to be asked to participate in this student discussion. History has always been a passion of mine ever since I was in high school, a very long time ago. And I'm very excited to be at Levine.
My name is Hannah Hassan. I am a poet, a storyteller, a playwright, and a speaker. I am also on the Levine Museum for the New South's Community Advisory Committee. I am excited to be here today because much of the work that I do in the world is centered around gathering stories so that we can preserve our history. So I'm really excited to talk to our students about history and about the future that they envision for our world and for their schools. I'm very excited to be here today. So welcome everyone. My name is Hannah Hassan, and today I'll be leading you through a conversation. We're gonna have an open and honest and a safe dialogue about history curriculum, and this will be based on students' perspectives. While there are a lot of debates that are happening in our country right now, and sometimes they're not that civil about what should be included and not included in the teaching of history, today we want to hear from students and an actual history teacher. Larry, you're our history teacher here today, so where should we begin?
Well, I certainly think we need to find out what they are discussing in their history classrooms. Mm-hmm. I taught history for most of my 41-year career, and I think I taught every history that you could teach. And it was certainly a challenge to have open discussions in the classroom. So I'm very excited to be a part of this one. So I guess the first thing is, what do you spend most of your time on in history classrooms? What is the level of discussion? What areas of history do you talk about? And what areas do you not talk about?
Personally, I'm in the IB program, so I've had a lot of different history classes throughout. I had American history, civics and economics, macroeconomics, microeconomics, a whole lot of economics classes. But the one thing that kind of stuck out to me between all of my classes, not just my history classes, but mainly in my history classes, that they try to jam pack a whole lot of information within, some of mine were semester classes, some of them were year-long classes. So it's a whole lot of information that I have to memorize dates. I have to make sure I know exactly who died when, who became president then, and all of this stuff just to get an A on a test. And yes, I'm a perfectionist. I'm that type of person. I have to have my A's. I have to have a B every now and then, but I strive for my A's. And it just feels like I'm not learning, I'm not fully absorbing the material. It's more of like memorization. Mm-hmm. So eventually now, okay, the War of 1812. I could probably tell you about that based off what I've learned out of the textbook, but there's never been like full discussions as to what happened or how it affected everyone. It was just, okay, this was the main people at the time, this is how it affected the majority, but we never really went into detail as to the minorities of the time or the people that you wouldn't really think about, because everything was taught, here's your textbook, go to page 121 and learn what's on that page, because it's going to be on your test in 2 days. So yeah, for me, it's just a whole lot of information that I have to memorize, and I'm not really absorbing a lot of it. Like as a senior, I could barely tell you what I learned in the history class. Not saying I didn't learn anything, I promise. But it's just like, and you have to have a certain amount of history classes in order to graduate.
Yeah.
So a lot of them, it's you just pick a random history class and like, oh yeah, I fulfilled my goal of the year, and that's it.
Yeah.
So that's how I took at it.
Anyone else relate to that?
I mean, I'm also in the IB program, and even me being in it for two to 3 years now, because I've carried over since 8th grade. So I've took a good three, 4 classes about history that I mainly need. And the first one was American history. We didn't really do much about the history. Like, it just went into details about wars, and as she says, we would went to the textbook, page number, test the next day. That's all we did mainly. But then last year, COVID, I was online, so I couldn't really do much about textbooks or anything. So it's like our teachers taught us the curriculum, but then it was mainly projects instead of tests. So it's like it was hard because that was civics and economics last year. This year I'm in economics and personal finance. That's a new history that they just brought into the IB program, and it's like I'm struggling, but at the same time I'm not struggling because I tend to procrastinate sometimes, and then it gets right back at me. But the history, I feel like we could do more and learn more if it was all teachers that put more effort into teaching us from their perspective and not straight out of the textbook. That's how I feel about history class.
So you think there's too much emphasis on what's in the textbook, is what you're saying?
Basically.
And right down here.
Okay, so I'm gonna bring in a different perspective because I go to a private school. So, I went to a public school for 8th grade and then went to a private school 9th through 12th grade, and I would kind of say like it's the opposite. Like we don't really we have textbooks, but it's more so like, okay, like that's the reading for tonight. Like we're not doing like textbook reading in class, and even then like our class is more so like discussion based. And I would say that like we do have I guess like once again like discussions about like the effects that it's having on like different groups, and like we go in depth, and our tests aren't like a lot of multiple choice. Like we may have like 10 to 15 multiple choice, but then it's too long free response essay questions. However, it's still like the content that we're covering isn't, in my opinion, like reflective of like all of history. Like we're going in depth about some subjects, but like completely like missing other subjects. So yeah.
I agree with that. I feel like history, especially in my school, gets very chunky. It goes literally from the agricultural revolution to the Renaissance to the bubonic plague to scientific revolution all the way to World War I. And I know that in between all of that, something else was happening, or even during the bubonic plague, that was just purely in the Western world. I know something was happening in Africa, something could have been happening in China, and we really don't cover that as much as I'd like us to. We talk about, of course, the Roman Empire, but we don't talk about, the Chinese Empire, the Japanese Empire, that it really did give us a lot of inventions like gunpowder and tea, which people think is for some reason Great Britain and stuff. But I just feel like things get very, very, very chunky. We go from like 16th century to 18th century, and that's 200 years. And as we saw with 2020, a lot can happen in a single in 1 year. And I feel like it can be really peculiar to cover in 2 weeks, just 200 years of history. And defined by this one thing. Of course, the bubonic plague wiped out a lot of people, but I know things were happening other than that. And then just to add something, I also feel like it feels very repetitive. I don't know if this is the same experience with everybody else, but I have been learning the same material about the Civil War since literally the 6th grade. I learned why it started, and even that can be a little convoluted sometimes. And then I learned that it ended. I only learned about one additional information my 10th grade year, and that was Sherman's March, where the General Sherman marched through the South and burned everything in his path to demoralize the South. That's the one interesting knowledge I've learned, and that really hasn't changed. Now, my dual enrollment classes do get a little different and get a little more interesting, but those are a lot more specific. So those will be world civilization classes or art history classes. So that'll more so focus on that instead of actually, the gist of American history or even what happened in these really specific eras. So.
I really want to touch back on that whole perspective thing, Jamari was saying, especially with the teachers. Me personally, I'm pretty good with textbooks, but I'm still, what's your take on this type of guy, especially with teachers. I like connecting with my teachers, and I tend to ask them a lot of personal questions, be like, do you agree with what this says? And then they'll be like, nah. I'm like, all right, well, I understand to a certain point they have to teach us certain things just because that's how the curriculum is, or certain things have to be that way. But I would personally like to see them put their take into it more, or see how they feel about it in an unbiased way, of course. But yeah, I just like seeing teachers being authentic, as we were saying earlier. And just giving their own perspective and asking us how we feel about it as well. And
I wish that all teachers would do that, but for a lot of different reasons, and particularly given the present climate, there are a lot of teachers who are afraid to express their opinion, and it's challenging if you have something to say, but you're afraid that what you say might not be liked by somebody, parents, whatever. And that's a challenge, very much a challenge. I certainly found it to be a challenge, but I was lucky to be at a school where I was supported. And that's not the case at every school.
Do you all feel safe with voicing that to your teachers?
Depending on it, you can express yourself, but to a certain extent. Kind of how you could do with your parents. It's like expressing yourself to a certain extent that doesn't piss them off, but at the same time doesn't, you're holding it into yourself. Like, you feel like you're trapped in a bubble. You can't tell anybody else how you feel. So I say it depends on the teacher and how they take things.
Thank you.
We couldn't talk about certain things or certain subjects, or really go into depth about certain things that we wanted to know more about, because it's like we felt it was set already, so we couldn't go outside of that. So it was automatically we had to stay on that subject or stay on that topic, and couldn't really voice an opinion about it. Because I had a history teacher this year that really opened my mind up to perception and stuff. Because about what everybody else was saying about perception, I believe even though history is facts and it all happened, we should be able to voice opinions on what we think really, how we think about it or how we feel about it, because I feel like it can be perceived in many different ways depending on who's the one telling the story.
So actually, I have the exact opposite experience as you all. The school I go to is very community-based, so the teachers that we have there are living the same experiences that we are. And luckily, I've been able to communicate myself very well with them just because we have an understanding of what's going on in our everyday lives. So I'm part of the IB program, and our IB coordinator actually gave us the option to sit down with our teachers and fill out a Google form of all the things that we felt that we were missing in our curriculum or that we wanted to go further in depth with. And they gave us the opportunity to do outside stuff outside the curriculum, because it is a set amount of, hours and stuff that you have to focus on, like the War of 1812 or even the Cold War. Of course, we had to focus on those specific things, but there's clubs and other programs that we were able to create in order to fill those gaps we felt were in our history.
On that, I think really so your IB program at West Charlotte, right, is a newer IB program. So you have schools like East Meg and any other school might be that I can't think of right now, that have kind of been set in tradition, and they kind of have already built a system that they think is going to work for the next 500 years, but it's really not, because you have more students and you have different perspectives of how things should go. And I think that's great that they had you physically fill out a Google form. I wish I could have filled out a Google form or sat and had a conversation with any of my teachers and say, hey, this is how I feel about something, And I think that we should include this in our like curriculum, and I think there should be a part where there is a discussion built into your curriculum. Like you have to have a certain amount of Socratic seminars, or you have to have a certain amount of discussion questions that you have to give to your students to get them talking about how they feel and how it affects them personally outside of, again, here's your textbook number, this is when you need it, and you have to have a certain amount of test scores, because what does that really matter? Like my mom's a teacher and they grade her off of test scores. And like they judge her whether or not her students have done like what they're supposed to do, or if they gotten a certain grade. And I don't think that's right, because my mom's an amazing person. Of course, I'm biased because that's my mother. But at the end of the day, if one student just may not understand the material or doesn't have the resources outside of school to understand that material, what does that mean for her? Like, she can offer as much tutoring as possible, but if they still don't get it at the end of the day, that shouldn't have to reflect on her. It's kind of a personal thing on the student. And schools don't really offer that much resources outside of, you need to figure out a time with your teacher for her to tutor you or him to tutor you, and that's it.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to, I think the question that you had asked is about, like, do you have, like, teachers, like, do your teachers listen to you? Or, like, does your school listen to you? And I think, you know, there's a big difference between, like, listening to people and, like, hearing people, because my school is a huge fan of sending out Google Forms. And trust me, I be filling out those Google Forms left and right. I'm gonna put, I don't care, they could say it's anonymous, they could say that it's not anonymous. I'm a senior at this point, so I'm gonna graduate. So I let my opinion be known. But my thing is, a lot of times I fill out these Google Forms, and, you know, like, they say that they read the Google Forms. They say that they're, like, acting on it. My thing is, some things don't take 1 to 2 years to make a change. Now, like, okay, introducing a new course, understanding you need to build a curriculum for the new course. However, other things, like, you know, having more class discussions, I feel like, I don't know, just, like, you know, switch some stuff around in your lesson plans, especially some days when teachers just want to throw in a little movie, and I'm like, we could have had a discussion instead of watching this old film from who knows when. But yeah, I just feel like when it comes to, like, sending out forms, asking students what they want, it needs to be, okay, like, I don't want you to only have a seat at the table, but I actually want to hear what you have to say. And I think that's a huge part of, like, what's missing. And then I also wanted to say, so my school has, like, introduced a lot of new courses. Like, we have Latin America studies, we have African American studies, we have social justice class. I think it's really important to know who's teaching those classes as well. I would say my school has done a great job, and I will, like, commend them on that, on having teachers who are actually equipped to teach those classes, to share their perspectives. Like, we have a Black woman teaching African American studies. Like, but once again, then we have world history classes, and it's a white male teaching that class, and, like, I'm like, sure, okay, like, they're equipped, they have a degree, but, like, are you really going to give us that perspective of, like, what, you know, we're talking about world history. That's a lot of material to cover. So whether that's bringing in, you know, guest speakers or something, I just feel like more perspectives need to be added into the class.
Okay, thank you.
I agree, and I think this conversation really just shows that we need to re-examine not only the role, but the relationship between teachers and students, and especially the power we give to students. I feel like teaching in school in general is a lot of times considered something that's done to a student and not something you do with a student. So with my education, I know, like you said, they love giving out Google Forms. I have not seen that one Google Form bring anything to fruition. So I think a lot of times they need to have these discussions because they need to encourage critical thinking in students. But I think a lot of times they're also very scared to do that, because once you give students the opportunity to speak their mind, you give them the opportunity to hold you accountable to things that are happening in the school, and that can be very dangerous to an administration. But I do think that's very important. I think students need to have the ability to critically think, because, like we said, even we try our best to examine and analyze, but at the end of the day, everyone who won is going to be able to share the history in a very particular way, even if we do have kind of the artifacts and the remnants of whatever war happened. So if that does happen, we should teach our students, hey, be mindful, this is who won, that's who wrote the history books. How does that influence what's happening? Who's teaching this? What do they have to gain from not telling you this? What do they have to gain from telling you this? It's always important to make sure not only that you're teaching students, but you're giving the students the equipment necessary to analyze the history that they are teaching you. And I feel like a lot of times that comes with giving power to the students, not only to critique and criticize, but also to examine and make sure that they truly understand that they need to ask questions.
Yes, I think that might be a good space to transition. We've talked a little bit about sort of the current state of what you are learning and what's happening in those classrooms. Maybe now we'll go over into a little bit of what you're not learning or what you feel like is missing.